Please go ahead.
Okay, so today we will be discussing role of natural resource management in achieving sustainable development. So so far you have been studying about what is the definition of sustainable development, what are the different aspects of sustainable development, how it came into picture, what were the global concerns which led to this concept of sustainable development. So, as we all know that natural resources are part of our daily life and as well as industry, agriculture, every aspect of our life as well as economy, GDP is dependent on natural resources. So today we'll be going discussing about how natural resources can be utilized in a manner and how they can be there can be tools and strategies which can govern their management and help us to go for sustainable development. So in this outline of presentation, we have natural resources, their classification, we'll be studying about their components, problems, issues, and what causes a depletion of natural resources, what are the approaches which can be applied for their management. There are three different kind of approaches which we'll be studying: integrated, adaptive, and precautionary approach. And then we have community based natural resource management approach, and then how gender is related with natural resource management, and how gender mainstreaming and different aspects of gender can be incorporated in natural resource management, and how gender plays a specific role for natural resource management. So starting with the need, I think most of you are already aware by now how sustainable development is significant for adequate management of all kind of resources, and natural resource is not any exception to that. So with increasing population and consumption, there is a need for supporting support for natural resource management. Then you, for ensuring that you are not over exploiting the resources, there is a need for natural resource management so that you can manage these resources in a manner which can fulfill your present needs as well as take care of the needs of future generations. Then you have to overcome the risk of runout. Like for example, nowadays frequently you must be hearing about various kind of news that coal reserves are getting finished and there will be no power supply for few days, and then again diesel prices, petrol prices are rising, and there are many kind of daily you will be hearing many kind of issues at international as well as national level which are concerning with these kind of fuel reserves as well as forest reserves. Then we are also threatened with the global scenario, how different kind of waste are creating intractable problems, and those problems are so humongous and so their magnitude is increasing day by day with the increase in their non-attention and you are not taking care of those tools and strategies which can manage them properly. So they are from local to they are forming a threat which is local in nature, but it is increasing from local to regional level, regional to state level. Then you have to understand the broader concepts of what are the ecosystem, how different kind of diverse ecosystems can be managed adequately, and then how conservation biologists, for example, if conservation biologists are there, they have to study not just the area of conservation, they have to study what are the different characteristics of threatened and endangered species, what is their life cycle, what is their breeding pattern, what is their nesting time in the year, and what is the different seasonal variations which impact their risk and vulnerability to climatic changes. So all those things become a part of natural resource management when it comes to taking care of the threatened species and habitats. So similarly, there is a need to work across different scales, reaching from molecular, genetic, because if you are working on these kind of natural resources like endangered species and habitats, then you have to work on, even on the molecular level, genetics level, and you have to study the hydrology of the landscape interactions. So that's why we will also be studying about the landscape ecology and watershed management. So then it also, this discipline also addresses the issues which are related with exploitation of natural resources. It also helps you to intricately interrelate the concept of sustainable development and how it can impact different varieties of species. Then there is a different approach of scientists and managers for the natural resource management, and you have to integrate these approaches, because if we take independent approach of management and independent approach of scientific study and research and development, then it will be of no use. For example, these days even DST, Department of Science and Technology, they have started introducing any industrial partners in any kind of scientific study. For example, we recently did a study for IIT Mandi, and there it was a Ministry of Human Resource Development funded project. So there our company was an industrial partner, so that if they develop the product, if they do the research and development, that product innovation and development and a prototype development can be done by the industry, and then marketing of that product can be done by the industry. So the research and development which has been done, whatever funds have been introduced and whatever fund have been invested in these R&D studies, they just don't lie as theses or as research papers in the libraries or in the documentation. So they should also be utilized for the benefit of the society, for creation of prototypes and for development of latest technologies. So that kind of approach is need of present environment and the present scenario, where there are so many global threats and challenges to be resolved. Then there is a need for understanding integration of diversity of interest of different kind of stakeholders. So for example, we have community based natural resource management. So in there we interlink economic benefits with natural resource management system. So these kind of concepts, I'll be giving you more examples and we'll be discussing it today. So to sum up, why we need management of natural resources, it's very simple. It's we need to do it this because human population is increasing. There is a need for utilization of natural resource which is increasing at exponential rate. Then we need to conserve these resources for future generations. We need to distribute these resources equally among different stakeholders. Then to reduce the damage, to ensure that there is a mitigation of challenges, there is mitigation of risk and impacts of waste generated from utilization of resources. Also, if you see the Millennium Development Goals, there is a target 9 in under goal 7, which ensures environmental sustainability. So here we have indicators linked to this target, which refer to forest cover and biodiversity, which refer to sustainable energy, water, and these are all environmental resources. And the objective of this target 9 and goal 7 of Millennium Development Goal is to integrate the principles of sustainable development into country policies and programs and reverse the loss of environmental resources. So the main objective is to ensure that there is no loss of environment resources. So what are the problems and of overexploitation? If we overexploit and do not manage these natural resources, so definitely there are different dimensions of risk and impacts on all kind of natural resources. For example, if we overexploit water, there will be depletion of groundwater, and as you already know, 90% of groundwater in our country is under dark zone or overexploited zone. And if you go for environment clearance, groundwater clearance of for your for a newly established industry in any area nowadays, so most of the areas which are critical areas, they do not allow any groundwater permission for new upcoming industry. So this is again a challenge. You have to find an area which is not overexploited. There only you can establish your industry, and you will be having availability of groundwater for your drinking, even for industrial purposes. So if we are not going to manage our resources properly, in the future scenario, there will be a dearth of even groundwater for basic necessity. Then wildlife extinction and endangering of animals and birds, forest deforestation, climate change, depletion of ozone. So most of these issues are, you have already learned through sustainable development aspects, that why we need to do this, why we need to ensure that sustainable development happens. So if it has to happen, it has to take care of natural resource management. Then after going through this lecture, you will be able to describe about natural resources, you will be able to explain the problems and causes of declining natural resources, you'll be able to ensure various approaches can be taken up for natural resource management, and to highlight issues of gender and sustainability in natural resource management. So as per definition, what is natural resource? So as the name indicates, as it the term indicates, it is naturally it is regarding the naturally available products. So it can be living products, that is biotic products, or non-living abiotic. So living biotic products will include forest reserves, it will include your biota, it will include flora, fauna, endangered species, habitats, and non-living, of course, will include your atmosphere, water, groundwater, soil. So they can be utilized for human uses. So whatever resource is naturally available, it can be living, it can be non-living, and can be utilized for human use, is defined as natural resource. So summing it up, all the components and forms of natural resources, so everything you see in your environment, directly or indirectly, it is impacting you. You are utilizing air and wind from the atmosphere. So atmosphere, we have different layers of atmosphere, starting from troposphere, stratosphere, mesosphere, exosphere. So all those layers of atmosphere, they are very significant for providing the main constituents of gaseous components, including your oxygen, carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxides, sulfur dioxides. So all those kind of gases are already present in in a proportion, in a percentage, as per the construction of your atmosphere ecosystem. Then you have forests, plants, animals, and microorganisms, fossil fuels. So forests, not even the microorganisms which are lying on the topsoil, even the microorganisms which are beneath the dead matter, which are beneath the topsoil, they are also part of forest only. Then fossil fuels, rocks, coal, mineral reserves, oil reserves. Then energy, the sun's energy stored by plants, fuel wood, agriculture wood, non-conventional energy. So all these kinds of energy resources are also part of natural resource system. Then water, ocean, seas, lakes, river, groundwater, soil. So these are all natural resources, and you already know that you are utilizing these resources from the first breath you take in this, on this earth. Okay. So components and forms of natural resources include atmosphere, forests, fossil fuels. Again, we in India, we have about 5.6 billion barrels of proven oil reserves. This is a data of January 2007, and most of these reserves are located in the western coast. Then in soil also, you have complex and dynamic blend of rocks and particles. And this topsoil takes thousands and thousands of years for ensuring that it is the most fertile layer, which can give nutrient to our food supply, which can give nutrient to our food crops and cash crops. Okay. So then we have about 70 to 73% of our earth covered with water. We have energy reserves in in terms of solar energy, then concentrated energy in terms of fossil fuel. Fossil fuel is again a kind of sun's energy stored under the reserves, which took several years for becoming fossil fuels. So it is again a major driver of technology and modern economy in any country all over the world. So we have fuel wood, We have even in India, we have 97,800 megawatt of energy from different kind of resources, including natural gas, coal, petroleum, sun, wind, nuclear energy. Then non-conventional energy is again coming up, and day by day this energy is being utilized in a more prevalent manner than earlier, because the technology is now becoming cheaper and cheaper every day, and there is a major thirst given to these kind of energy sources in every state. And latest we have a skill council for green jobs, where a separate department has been evolved for utilization of this non-conventional energy, and there is training being given skilled for skill development of solar technicians. Okay. Again, if you see what is the classification of natural resource, so it can be classified on different bases. If you classify or on the terms of origin, it will be different. Then if you consider criteria of renewability, if whether it is renewable or non-renewable, then how it can be developed, the stage of development. So these are the three different bases which we use for classification. So if I see origin, how it has originated, whether it has originated from organic sources, biotic sources, living sources, then it is biotic. If it has originated from abiotic sources, then it is abiotic natural resource. So on the basis of origin, there is two type of classification, biotic and abiotic. So again, on the basis of renewability, whether these resources can be renewed easily, can be replenished, or can be reproduced, then it is renewable. For example, sunlight, air, wind, which are continuously available, and their quantity is not affected by human consumption. That's why nowadays, with increasing population and with increasing in stress on our non-renewable resources, thirst is going, emphasis is being laid on renewable resources, because their quantity is not affected by human consumption. And if you see non-renewable resources, obviously they cannot be renewed, and they take over long geological periods for their renewation or replenishment. So that's why their rate of formation is extremely slow, and they cannot be replenished once they are depleted. And considering again on the basis of stage of development, we have potential resources and actual resources. Okay, so potential resources are basically which exist in a region and may be utilized in future. So there is a potential for their utilization in future. And for example, the petroleum may exist in some parts of country, in some sedimentary rocks, but so far we are not aware. So at present, we don't have any information, but there can be a R&D in future, and then there can be prospects of drilling and prospects of exploring these resources in future. So those resources are called potential resources. And if you see what is the actual data, present status, on the basis of a stage of development of present scenario, and the present R&D which has already been done. So for example, wood or the groundwater resources, what kind of resources we are actually having at present, those resources are categorized as actual resources. Okay, so the part of the actual resource can be developed profitably with the available technology. So that is called a reserve. Okay, so we have groundwater reserves, we have fuel reserves, we have mineral reserves. So for example, if you have to mine, if you have to take up mining project, or you have to go for sand mining or mining of minor minerals, then also at district level also, there is a study done by the irrigation department or the agricultural department, as well as the for example, in Punjab, there is irrigation department which is responsible for sand mining. So there you have to do a district level study, and you have to identify what are the different kind of reserves which can be utilized for soil and minor mineral mining. So those kind of studies and those kind of actual resource inventorization has been already developed, where we can identify specific resources which can be profitably explored. Okay, so they are called actual resources. Then on the basis of wind and right of stakeholders and natural resources, there are different kind of natural resources, state property and private property. Okay, so the ownership and control over the use of the resources is in the hands of state. So those kind of resources are called state property. For example, protected areas of national parks and rivers, as well as the ponds in village areas, they are called state properties. So, and private properties are actually held by an individual or corporate entity, and they both the benefit and duties for these private properties fall under the ownership of the owner of the property. Okay, so these are basically the private properties which are individually owned. Okay, while the state property are the community assets. Then common property. Common property is resources that are private property of a group. For example, in village areas, in rural areas, you have, or an indigenous tribe or tribal area, you have a village, you have common grazing grounds, you have common water bodies, rivers, forest. Then fourth is non-property. So under the classification on the basis of right of stakeholders, we have four categorization. One is state property, second is private property, then common property and non-property. Non-property where potential users have equal liability to use it accordingly. For example, air has no owner. It is a common canopy above every individual. So those kind of non-property or open asset resources are they are biggest challenge for their management. For example, in Delhi, there is a smog issue every year during winter season. So there it is a canopy, and we cannot control which person is introducing pollution in the air canopy and which is not producing pollution in the air canopy. And these are basically there are many fugitive and non-fugitive pollution sources into that kind of non-property open access natural resource. Okay, so there has to be a policy, a very stringent policy for the control and management of non-property open access resources. What are the characteristics of these natural resource management issues? So why are these issues very specific and very unique in context of natural resource management? Because they are inherently complex. They involve different kind of ecosystems. They involve all kind of ecological cycles, hydrological cycles, climate, flora, fauna. You have to study all the issues in integration. Okay, then they are dynamic, they keep on changing. For example, if you do modeling for climate change or related studies for the management of air quality, so the quality which you are predicting at present, that might be there and that might not be there because of the, for example, if people are taking active actions for management of air pollution, they are adopting strategies to ensure that they do not introduce too much pollution. They are following Euro 4 norms, and they are regularly taking care of their vehicles, and they are more dependent on mass transportation system. Then definitely in future you can control those kind of issues. So these kind of issues keep on changing with long-term and short-term reversible as well as irreversible impacts. And you have many stakeholders involved. You have politics, you have policies, you have geographical boundaries, even transboundary, the boundaries between two nations are involved sometimes. And you have to keep on resolving conflicts so that you can ensure that these management strategies can be implemented for a longer period. And what are the problems and issues? Problem is again over exploitation of natural resource at rates which are higher than the rates at which it gets replenished. Then dramatic increase in per capita resource demand. So the demand is increasing day by day. For example, in India also, if you see the rate of generation of plastic waste in India is 11 kg per person. And if you see rate of waste generation in US, there is 110 kg per person. So from compared to developed nations, developing regions are definitely having lesser per capita resource waste generation or resource demand. But definitely because of the increasing population and exponential increase in demand, there is again a dramatic increase in per capita resource and per capita waste management demand. Then deterioration in environment quality in terms of deforestation, poor biological productivities, the kind of nutrition that was available in our soil many years ago, it has reduced up to 20 times. Okay, so that kind of hydrological imbalances and soil erosion is again a reason. Poor biological productivity is again a reason. So with increasing elevation, the systems are characterized by lower rates of biotic, abiotic and cultural exchange. There is lower rate of growth, there is slower aging and late maturity, and there is a poorer reproductive efficiency of these natural systems, and higher resistance is there, and there is a visible impact of environment problems. So earlier when we used to talk about climate change, people used to sometimes challenge scientists and R&D going on in these issues, that there is not going to be any such bigger climate change in future. But nowadays these changes are visible to us. All of us are actually experiencing these changes, how climate is changing day by day, how the severity of and how the increase in temperature in summers and how there is a decrease in temperature in winters. So those kind of dramatic changes are now visible. That is not dependent on the prediction, and that is not dependent upon some future scenario. Okay, so there is an urgent need for ensuring that these causes of depletion of natural resources are attended. So over exploitation has to be attended at every level of, for example, non-renewable resources should be used in minimum, and there should be more thirst, and already there is a major thirst going on, and people are also adopting renewable technologies. And then there is another reason for natural resource depletion, which is forest fire. It is one of the major reason for destruction of renewable resources like tree, vegetation and surface layer of humus and animals. And these fires can be caused due to intentional reasons, it can be accidental reason, it can be a natural fire. So there are different kind of forest fires. But when we look at the like global forest reserve, this is a major concern. Every year there is depletion of natural resource due to forest fires. So there are three kind of approaches which we have to take up for management of natural resources. One is integrated approach, second is adaptive, and third is precautionary. So when you see these terms, integrated, adaptive and precautionary, so as the name denotes, these three approaches are different in the kind of strategies and tools they adopt. Okay, so in integrated you have to adopt integration of all aspects, okay, ranging from the molecular level, genetic level, regional level, as well as the climatic changes, and you have to integrate all kind of strategies, all kind of ecological systems. So that kind of approach will be categorized under integrated. When you see adaptive, you have to see from the adaptation point of view. Okay, how I am going to get adapted for future challenges, how I am going to introduce changes in my management considering the challenges which are predicted for future. So that will be called adaptive. It is more a defensive kind of approach. And precautionary is basically, as you all know, that precaution is always better than cure. So before any problem comes, you have to ensure that all the tools and strategies are already in place, and all the issues and all the requirements from stakeholder management point of view, for institutional arrangement point of view, they are already in place. For example, for climate change, there was a study which had started 20-30 years back, and there were R&D and modeling studies which had predicted climate change. So at those levels, like even in the agricultural sector, precautionary approach was started years back. How we have to bring a change in our cropping pattern, how different kind of crops have to be introduced, especially in international studies. For example, I have recently visited a Japan International Cooperation Agency project in Himachal, and there it was required to do a gender survey for the impacts of the study. So it was basically an agricultural horticulture based project, where people were given training, and they were given resources, financial help, as well as technical help from engineering point of view also, to take up crop changes in the crop pattern. So from cash crops, from major crops like corn, wheat, rice and barley, they were introduced into exotic vegetable production, so that their income can be sustainable. And if there is a threat to their cash crops, there is an alternative, and the alternative is requiring less of water as compared to your cash crops. And again, it will give you more income, and it will give you more nutrition which is required, considering the kind of level of nutrition which is going down in our soil, and the productivity which is going down in our soil. So all these strategies, tools were integrated way back, and there were fund allocations many years back. They were planned, and now they are being implemented as we can see visible changes in climatic pattern. So these kind of projects have been conceptualized and have been formulated, and strategies have been formulated earlier. So that is called precautionary approach. We'll be studying more about this. So when you see integrated approach, it started way back in 1992, when United Nations Conference for Environment and Development held in Rio de Janeiro, and most nations adopted these principles for integrated management of land, water and forest. So it's a very holistic approach, where you are going to incorporate skills of engineering also, economics also, politics also, social and environment management also. So being multidisciplinary and being an integrated approach, it involves all kind of disciplines. Okay, so there can be a site specific nature of water resources, then you have to use land use, and people have to be involved in feasible management of resources. So it can be done on national basis without basing it on logical management units. Okay, for example, using water as natural resource, it makes a good sense to use river catchments or basins as units. So when you do watershed management or watershed watershed systems are managed, then there you are divide the whole system on the basis of the stream order, order 1 streams, order 2 streams, order, so up to 4 and 5 order streams are classified. So that kind of system is taken, so that a complete system, once a complete system is conceptualized, then on unit level it is implemented. Okay, so it's a very systematic approach, and it is conceived and executed from the top. Okay, so alternative view is definitely from the bottom, but it is conceived as a means of scaling up the community-based scheme. Okay, so sometimes when we do watershed management, we introduce a pilot scale project, and then we introduce that pilot study in different areas of the region. So this approach has advantages because, and again, it has disadvantages if you compare it with the other approaches. So it can help you in achieving local ownership of the process. Okay, so people get involved very easily in these kind of projects, and they help you in developing projects in headwater catchments or put up a high priority on ensuring that the resources of the downstream users are not compromised. Okay, for example, if a riverbed project is there, so if integrated project management has been done, so the complete system has been studied, and then downstream and upstream both ownership issues have been tackled at the same time and planned at the same time. So it will not happen that during the implementation stage, downstream stakeholders are getting exploited, or they are not getting enough water for their daily activities or agricultural activities. So then there is adaptive approach. So adaptive approach, this gained attention for means of linking learning with policy and implementation. So as you keep on learning with different kind of policies, you adapt yourself and you implement those policies. So it was basically specific idea of work done by different kind of scientists, varying from Walters and Lee. So these scholars have framed and articulated the idea of an approach that treats on the ground actions and policies. So this is a contemporary concept of adaptive management, and it has been applied in various sectors in Australia, Canada, and it makes it an attractive strategy in situations where high levels of uncertainty is there. So if you see that a natural resource system is having much higher level of uncertainty, in those areas you have to go for adaptive approach. So this idea is linked to disciplines outside natural resource management. For example, how it can improve the quality, how it can improve the business, how it can help in learning organizations, experimental sciences, industrial ecology, and then how importance of design and experimentation is required. What is the need of responsive institutions? So those kind of aspects are studied in adaptive approach. Then the third approach comes precautionary approach, which is because, as the name denotes, it's a kind of policy which ensures that there is enough precaution taken by a project or by a development or infrastructure project, so that there is no impact in future. So it is a fundamental tool for sustainable development, and the different kind of studies like environment impact assessment. So they are also a part of precautionary approach, because we predict impacts of that project in future, and we try to introduce mitigation measures for those impacts which can occur in future. So it raises a relation between biodiversity conservation and sustainable development. It ensures conservation for biodiversity. So precautionary approach was first given attention by International Union for Conservation of Natural Resources at the first Conservation Congress in Montreal in 1996. So at that time, it was used to advise that it is a best practice for environmental context and to disseminate the recommendations which are of particular attention for secretariats of international environmental and resource use conventions and agreements. So basically it formed a foundation for all different kind of conventions and agreements at international level. And there were two subsequent workshops after this precautionary principle was introduced. The first was in March 1997, and then the second was in 1999 in Cambridge, UK by Resource of Africa. Then what is the concept? It is basically focused primarily on the interaction between precautionary principle and industrial economic interest. As I already told you that EIA, environment impact assessment, is also part of it. So basically, if an industry wants to get established, so we introduce these tools and strategies so that there is no hurdle in industrial development. Okay, so industrial development and environment sustainability as well as environment protection can go hand in hand. So we introduce this approach so that we can ensure and assess the impacts, and accordingly we introduce tools and strategies as well as technologies. For example, if a foundry is going to be established, and now we have a latest technology of electric arc, so we won't go for the conventional technology where higher level of pollution were there. The air pollution control devices were very conventional, they were not able to reduce the suspended particulate matter in your stacks. So these days, if you have a better technology, you will adopt that technology, and that technology will be accepted and adopted under your environment impact assessment report. Okay. So these are basically in international projects also, you have a precautionary approach, you have safeguards, you have environmental safeguards, you have social safeguards, you have gender mainstreaming safeguards, gender safeguards. So all these issues are introduced under safeguards for serious and particularly irreversible harm that can be caused to natural resources, so that we don't have to jeopardize onto our future generation capacity to provide to their needs. Okay, so again, it was formulated in Brundtland Commission, and it was by virtue of limiting the nature or extent of economic and livelihood activities. It was recognized by World Trade Organization as well. Then comes our community-based natural resource management. So in community-based natural, it's a very local, locally beneficial concept, where people from rural communities can ensure that the whatever project activity is being implemented, you have to link the economic benefits of to that project. For example, we implemented a project in Punjab where there was a wetland, and that wetland needed to be conserved because of the threat of extinction to the local flora and fauna. There were many migratory birds, more than 80,000 birds used to visit that area during winter season. So for example, this case study, what example I'm giving you is about the Keshopur wetland study, Keshopur wetland in Punjab. So there, Asian Development Bank introduced a project, and there were infrastructural project requirements where, for example, bird watchtowers were conceptualized, and jetty parking areas were conceptualized, so that ecotourism can be linked with that area. So what we did to ensure that it's a community based, now it is a project, it's an infrastructure project for wetland development. But if I have to make it a community based natural resource management project, then I have to take care, I have to do a survey, what is the different requirement and what are the different concerns of community, the local people who are living there, the rural communities or the villages which are part of that wetland. So according to the needs of people, according to the kind of skills they are having, we can introduce certain activities and certain income generation activities in that project. For example, when we studied this Keshopur wetland, there were 5 villages, and the people were there were some young people who were not ready to take up agricultural activities that used to be taken up by their parents or grandparents. So we, as per their level of education, we told them about being a nature guide, how they can study about different kind of birds which are visiting their area, how they can study about the different kind of animals, flora, fauna that is existing in their area, and how tourists from other places can visit their area, and they can introduce local and farm-based tourism to those tourists, and how they can act as a guide for those tourists and help them to watch the migratory birds which are existing in that area. So if, for example, 80,000 birds are visiting and more than 100 species of flora and fauna are there, so tourist guides, a training for tourist guides was arranged, so that, and a website was maintained, and there the information of all the tourist guides was shared, so that there can be a income generation in future for these youth in that area. Again, for the people, for the women in that area who were not economically independent, we saw they have skills of weaving and beading and making different kind of products from the local weed that was going, water hyacinth, and local name was jalkumbi. So these kind of activities, so those people were given training on developing better products, the products which can be accepted in the market. For example, if they are making these pots or baskets, they are not so much consumer friendly, or they are not so appealing to the larger markets. So they were told how to make footwear from these kind, how to make bags and purses, ladies bags and ladies purses, so that they can sell these products in a larger market, and they can gain from economic benefit out of these activities. And their products should be designed, and their the color scheme, the design scheme, they that should also be very appealing to the larger market. So those kind of activities were introduced. So I'm giving you this example to understand how a community based natural resource management system is actually implemented. So people will conserve a resource. Now if they are in they know that they have to, this is a weed, water hyacinth is a weed and it is a waste. But if they are told that this is a waste, they are not going to cut it and take it out from the wetland area, because it is not going to give them anything. It is just a matter of more labor and time. But if they use it as a raw material for product development, then definitely they will harvest it after every regular interval, and then the issue of water hyacinth or the wild weed will be resolved, wetland will also be managed, and they will be generating income. So this can be these kind of strategies can be evolved only if you are present in that local situation, if you are studying that local situation, the kind of weeds that are there or the kind of skills that are there, and how you have to integrate everything, and then you have to conceptualize the project. So people will definitely conserve a resource that is linked directly to their quality of life. And when local people quality of life is enhanced, their effort and commitment also increases, that we should conserve our resources for future. So it's a very cyclic concept. Okay, so if you are incorporating, for example, there is another example of pond development and pond rehabilitation and rejuvenation projects which we have introduced in Punjab. So there also we for with pond we had with the larger pond which we have rejuvenated, we introduced a fish pond. So in that pond, people can do fish farming, and they can generate income from fish farming. So if they are getting income from that fish pond, they are going to conserve that pond. They are going to definitely clean and maintain that pond in future. So if we have spent 2 crores in rejuvenation and rehabilitation of a village pond, so that how it is going to be maintained in future, how we can ensure that this project is sustainable. So by incorporating local community, by linking their income generation activity with the project, you can ensure that people can keep on generating income from that project and keep on maintaining that project, to ensure that in future also they can get benefit from for their income and for their local ecosystem management. Okay, so this concept was again advocated by United Nations in the Convention on Biodiversity and the Convention to Combat Desertification. So people here they have the motive behind the participation, and it is differentiated as either people centered or participatory, or planner centered, or nominative, or results in passive recipients. So that is dependent on the kind of strategy we devise while conceptualizing the project. So locals may be reluctant to challenge government recommendations for fear of losing promised benefits. So they might support you for these kind of projects in initial stages. But if they are not given those promised benefits, that project cannot be sustainable in long term. So there are again many success stories So if you see Amrita Devi Bishnoi, she has recently received award for wildlife conservation, and she belonged to the Khejrali village, and she made a group of 363 people. So we have also in the projects I have discussed, we have given an institutional framework under these projects. We formed self-help groups so that this project is given a name, this project has a bank account, this project, the group of people working in this uh, group, self-help group or the registered group, they are going to give dedicated time to this project, and then they can act under a institutional framework and keep on maintaining those funds for their personal activity, for their income generation activities. Again, in Chipko movement, Sundar Lal Bahuguna, he is the pioneer in Chipko movement. Then Arabari Forest Range, Shri A.K. Banerjee is there. So these are all success stories where stakeholders, people who have direct or indirect interest in forest, they can work in different areas, in conservation of forests, in replenishment of trees. Even in Rajasthan, we have many projects, we have many success stories where from desertification they have gone towards water sufficiency. Okay. So then we have this large objective of this presentation, gender and natural resource management. So why do we, Mr. Manoj Thakur is there. I think his mic needs to be muted. So why do we have gender concept in different natural resource management? Because most of the natural resources are being utilized by women groups for management of their household, for management of their local economy. So if women have unequal access to information and resources of these management issues, so then their decision making and developing policy is underrepresented. Okay, so most of the international projects, they have a specific requirement of gender mainstreaming and women empowerment in all kind of projects. So without this, without a green signal under gender mainstreaming, the project cannot continue. And I have myself been a part of many such projects, so I can vouch on that this is a very significant aspect. You have to study it, and you have to ensure that the concerns of certain gender, it is not about men or women, it is about the gender which is lagging behind, or that is the concern of a gender which is not being attended in a particular situation. And most of the time, because women, the ideas and the decision making of women is compromised, that's why it is more reflected on being a woman oriented approach. But gender approach is basically to make the both men and women a part of the project, and so that the project impacts both of them in an equal manner. Okay, for example, if I am constructing a road stretch, there was a 95-kilometer road stretch, and it was again a World Bank project. So there, if I am building a road, that will definitely help people who have vehicles, who have conveyance, who have cycles, who have two-wheelers, three-wheelers. But what about the women who mostly don't have these kind of conveyances? Mostly in rural areas. So they either walk on foot or they have cycles. Okay, so even if they are walking on foot for collection of water from a particular area, providing a walking area, okay, a walking slip by or a sidewalk area is a very good option to ensure that their concerns and their issues are represented in the project. So that can be designed at the start of the project, so that their time is also saved, and they are also getting benefit out of the infrastructure when the project comes into picture. So these are very small, there are very small changes, but when we look into them into the larger perspective for sustainability of the project, they are very beneficial. Okay, So again, women have more, they have to rely heavily on natural resources for sustaining their families, for due to deterioration of natural resource base also, they are more impacted. So again, it is a requirement that we should improve education of rural women so that they can play a key role in managing these natural resources. They do not cause over exploitation of natural resources due to lack of knowledge or lack of education. So the goal of sustainable use and management of natural resources can only be achieved if there is an equal capacity building and empowerment of men and women through education, through provision of healthcare, user-friendly technologies, and employment opportunities. So again, under goal policies and planning of these development projects, there are definitely different roles for men and women. So all those roles of men and women in agriculture, in decision making, and in use of traditional knowledge, they have to be taken care of when you are, whenever you are designing a natural resource management project, to ensure that there is this is a holistic approach, and this has adequate attention to the gender differences. Okay. So now this is a case study of possible integrated approach, and it was implemented by Global Action Water in Caspian Sea Basin. So in Caspian Sea Basin, this is the area of Caspian Sea Basin, and basically it was under the strategic action plan on binding environmental Caspian Convention under Global Environment Fund. So the major issues that were analyzed, first there was an analysis, what kind of different issues are there, what kind of diagnostic analysis, transboundary concept challenges are there. Then strategic action program was made, and then national Caspian action plans were made. So first you have to analyze what is the issue. Accordingly, you will make a program, strategic action program. Then as per those action program, you have to make step-by-step action plans, how you are going to implement those activities at a very local level, at a very shorter time scale. So those action plans were then implemented to ensure that there is no over exploitation of bioresources, threats to biodiversity are addressed, water pollution is addressed, unsustainable coastal area development. So these were the issues which were identified before starting the project. And there was a strategic action program which was started. So target one was that the sustainability of commercial fisheries should be ensured. So that they can ensure that these fisheries can continue for a longer period of time because of the threats which were there in the local fisheries, fishery areas. So then you have to ensure that the stocks are rehabilitated. Whatever species of fish you are harvesting, they are again sustained. Their spawning grounds or egg laying grounds are conserved, they are protected. So the kind of strategies or the kind of activities which were introduced, the people were given training on how to go for fishing and how to ensure that they are not disturbing their natural spawning grounds where eggs are laid, so that there is a continuous growth of fish, and there is continuous multiplication of species, and there is continuation in the activity related with the fisheries, and should be a reduced dependency of coastal communities. So they should promote small scale aquaculture rather than going to the seashore directly. They should ensure that aquaculture is also promoted side by side, so that there is not complete dependency on coastal communities, and alternative livelihoods should be given, so that in lean periods or the periods where fish population is low, at those times their economic sustainability is not hampered. So targets were determined for how conservation of biodiversity will be ensured, how water quality will be ensured, how coastal zones will be protected. So these kind of issues were identified, then action plans were made, objectives were determined, and again activities were identified. What kind of activity will ensure that these strategies are implemented? So considering this overall study of the geological area, they identify different kind of strategies. So that's it. I would like to ask all the participants if they have any queries or any suggestions, any recommendations, anything they want to share or ask, please go for it.